Hey everyone, and welcome back to Major Issues Distance Learning. Today we're talking about personal identity. So first I want to talk about what personal identity is, just what that phrase means, and then what the problem of personal identity is, like what the philosophical issue is here. And then we're going to run through some sort of fun sci-fi thought experiment type cases. So brain transplant, fission, and the transporter case. And we're going to look at some possible answers to the problem of personal identity, views you could have, and how they handle these different cases. So first, we're going to talk about psychological continuity views, and then towards the end, we'll talk about animalism and the Buddhist view. And these are all different answers to what a person is and what it takes for a person to exist through time, for a person to survive. So what is personal identity? Personal identity is it's a special case of what philosophers call identity through time or identity over time. So things exist across time at different times. Tables, chairs, people, houses, dogs, trees, rocks, planets, they all exist through time, meaning they exist at one time, and then they also exist at a later time, and they exist at all the times in between. So you existed yesterday and the day before that. You've existed for many years. You will hopefully exist for many years into the future. So you exist over time. And you are the same person all through time. Just like the Earth is the same planet all through the many, many years it has existed. It's the same object. The properties of the object can change over time. So the Earth at one point only had one continent. Now the Earth has multiple continents. You were once much shorter than you are now as a baby and as a child, I assume. I was. I'm sure we all were. We were smaller at one point in the past. As we get older, we will have further changes happen. We will have additional memories later. In the past, we had fewer memories. We have memories now that we did not have as babies because the things we remember hadn't happened yet. So what you're like can change over time, but you are still the same single entity that you have been for years and you will be into the future. So personal identity is just the phenomenon of persons, of people, persisting through time. Being identical in the sense of being the one same object all through time. Not identical in the sense of qualitatively identical, not identical meaning exactly the same in size, shape, appearance, etc. Not identical in that sense, but identical in what philosophers call numerical identity, being the same single one object all through time. That baby in your parents' baby pictures is you. It is the same entity that you are right now. You are the same object through time. And so personal identity raises some philosophical issues. Identity over time for inanimate objects also raises some philosophical issues. But personal identity, identity of persons over time, raises some sort of unique and specific issues. So the problem of personal identity is just explaining what it is that makes you the same person through time. In virtue of what is that baby in your parents' baby pictures the same person that you are now? Because several years ago there was a baby, and that baby was made of completely different stuff than you are now. On my understanding, it takes 7 to 10 years for your body to replace all of the atoms, all of the molecules in your body, all of the physical stuff in your body is replaced after about 10 years. So we're all older than 10. We're older than 7 or 10 or whatever the timeline is. So the newborn baby that your parents have pictures of was made of completely different stuff than you are now. Physically, it's made of completely different material. And it has a completely different personality, has different interests, different likes and dislikes than you do. You probably enjoy solid food, and the baby probably didn't. You remember lots of things that the baby doesn't remember. You can speak at least one language. The baby can speak no languages. You can read, the baby can't. You like music, the baby doesn't understand music, etc. You and this baby in the past seem completely different in a lot of ways. And yet, ordinarily, we say that you are that baby, that you and the baby are the same one person. So what makes you and the baby the same person? In virtue of what are you the same person? And we want to answer this question because answering the question will help us know what it takes for us to survive. If we know what we are as what a person is, if we know what it takes to be the same person at one time and at another, then we'll have a better idea of what it takes for us to survive. Because people now, with the advent of computers and things, sort of, Elon Musk, Richard Branson type of people, have talked about the possibility of, in the distant future, uploading our minds onto computers. And they say that by doing this, we will become immortal. We will survive long after what would have been biological death because our mind will be uploaded and running on this computer hardware. But is that survival, or is that us dying and then a computer pretending to be us? That's a question worth asking, because at some point in the future, us or our descendants are going to be faced with the option, potentially, of destroying their body and uploading their brain onto a computer. And it would be nice to know ahead of time, before making that decision, whether that kills you or makes you immortal. Because those are two pretty different outcomes. And we're not going to be able to answer that question. We're not going to be able to know whether that's killing us or making us immortal unless we know what it takes to be the same person at one time or another. What it takes for a person to survive through time. Another possibility is if your body is alive, but your brain is destroyed, do you survive? If your body, without any of the higher cortexes of the brain, the body's still going and breathing and still biologically alive, but the brain is gone and there's no conscious thought there. Are you still alive? Have you survived in that case? The answer to that is going to depend on our answer to the problem of personal identity. Our answer to the question of, in virtue of what does a person persist through time? Because persisting through time is just a fancy philosophical way of saying surviving. So if we want to know what it takes for us to survive both in sort of futuristic upload your mind onto a computer cases and in real world current, brain dead in a coma cases, if we want to know whether or not someone survives, we need to know what it takes for a person to persist through time. And so we want to know, what does it take for you as a person to survive through time? And that raises the question of what a person is. What are people? One option, one answer, which is the animalism answer that we'll look at later in the lecture, is a person's an organism. It's a biological organism. A person is an animal, and that's it. It's just an animal. If the animal survives, if the organism survives, the person survives. Another answer is that a person is an immaterial soul. The person is a soul, survives after biological death, goes on to an afterlife, etc. Another option is that a person is a mind, whatever minds are. So next week, we're going to talk about the mind-body problem and questions about what a mind is, whether or not a mind is a physical thing. But you can say that a mind isn't just the body, but also isn't a soul. So you can say that a mind is something like a program that your brain is running. That is one answer that some people in philosophy and cognitive science think is right, that your mind is something like a program your brain is running. And that's the kind of view that underlies this, we'll upload your mind onto a computer and then you'll be immortal idea. The thought is your mind is just something your brain is doing. And so if we get something to do that same stuff instead of your brain, you can survive without your brain, and you can survive without your body, even if there's no immaterial soul and there is no afterlife or anything like that. So whatever minds are, you might think that a person is just a mind. You might think a person is just an organism, an animal, basically a living body. Or you might think a human's an immaterial soul. And there are lots of other answers you can give besides that. You might think it's some combination. You might think none of them are right. You might think there's no real answer here. That's going to be the Buddhist answer we look at later, that there is no self. And so we want to know what persons are, and we want to know what it takes for a person to survive through time. And so one question we can ask to try to get at the answer here, to try to get at the truth, one angle we can approach this from is by asking, what could you give up or replace and still be you? What could you give up or replace and still exist? And that's how we're gonna approach some of these questions. That's what the brain transplant and the Fission case, at least, are gonna force us to ask. So, let's look at the brain transplant case. So, here's a thought experiment. You and another person swap brains. So you, let's call you person A, and someone else, person B, walk into the hospital, undergo a surgery, and then the person A brain walks out inside the person B body, and the person B brain walks out inside the person A body. And these two people walk out into the world. So one of the people after this procedure happens, afterwards, one of these two people has your original body and a new brain. And the other person has your original brain and a new body. So, the question is, where are you? Are you the person with your original brain and a new body? Or are you the person with your original body and a new brain? Or are you neither? That's one option. You might think that the procedure kills you. What you are is the body-brain combination, and if you separate that, then you cease to exist. That's one possibility. But you might think, no, I can survive. People survive organ transplants all the time. Heart transplants, people survive. People can get eye transplants and survive. Take out one organ, put in a new one, you survive. No one dies in that case. If two people swapped hearts, they wouldn't cease to exist. You wouldn't have two new people come into existence. It'd be the same two old people, two original people. So, which of these people is you? Are you the person with your original brain and a new body, or the person with your original body and a new brain? One thing we can look at, or one thing we might say, is ask them. Ask the people who they are. And it's pretty clear that the person with your original brain and a new body is going to say that they're you. That person is going to insist that they're you. They will answer to your name. They will happily recite information that only you know. They will remember everything you've done, or everything that you remember doing anyway. They will know and recognize your family and friends, whereas the person with your original body and a new brain will not recognize your family and friends, will not remember anything that you've done in your life, will not answer to your name, will have a different personality, etc. And so you might think that the person with your original brain is you, because they have all your memories. They recognize your family. They have your exact personality. They have your sense of humor. They remember all of your life experiences. And you might think that they are you. Another way of looking at the brain transplant case is, suppose that only one of the people in this procedure was going to survive. Which would you prefer to survive? From purely selfish, self-interested reasons, which would you prefer to survive? The person with your original brain or the person with your original body? What would you prefer? And most people, or at least most philosophers, say they would prefer the person with their brain survive, the person with their memories, their personality, because that intuitively feels like that's us. That's who we are. We are that person with that brain. That person with our mind, with our brain, with our mind, with our memories. That's us. That's who we are. If that person survives, we survive. And if you give that answer, if that sounds right to you, then you're probably picturing or assuming what's called a psychological continuity view. And the psychological continuity view says that you survive at a time if there is someone or something at that time that is psychologically continuous with you. And there are a lot of different accounts about what psychologically continuous means. That doesn't really matter here. Some people put it in terms of memories. If someone remembers your memories, remembers events in your life from your perspective, then they are you. If other people put it in sort of more complex terms, like if their personality is causally connected to past events in your life, then they're you. You don't really have to worry about what psychological continuity means. What you need to worry about is the fact that psychological continuity views say having the same mental stuff, having the same mind, memories, personality, etc. That is what matters in survival. That is what determines whether or not you persist through time. So on the psychological continuity view, you survive brain transplants. And you are wherever your brain goes, because your mind goes where your brain goes, at least in brain transplant cases. Wherever your mind goes, wherever your brain goes, that's where your mind goes. So your mind, all the mental, psychological stuff that makes you who you are, goes with your brain. And so you are the person with your original brain and a new body in the brain transplant case. So that's the psychological continuity view. But there is a problem for the psychological continuity view, and that is fission cases. So your brain has two hemispheres, right? There's a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. So suppose one of those hemispheres was destroyed and the other hemisphere was fine. In the middle, there's something called a corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. But that can be severed. It's used to treat epilepsy sometimes, severing the corpus callosum so the left and right hemispheres don't interact directly. And so we can imagine corpus callosum gets severed, one hemisphere is removed, maybe it got damaged, maybe it was necessary for some medical reason, maybe you were kidnapped by crazy doctors and this is what they did. Doesn't really matter why this happened, but let's say this happens. One hemisphere of your brain is destroyed, the other is left in your original body. Do you survive? Do you survive with only one hemisphere of your brain? Looks like yeah, right? I mean, with people suffer brain damage all the time. I mean, not all the time, but it happens, and they survive. They're different, but I mean, we're all different over time. They still survive. People with brain damage or who have to have part of their brain removed for medical reasons or something, it seems like they survive. They don't cease to exist, and then a new person in their body with their memories now lives in their place. That would be crazy. They survive with brain damage and with part of the brain removed. So it looks like if you have one hemisphere of your brain removed, then you will survive. But if we say you survive having one hemisphere of your brain removed, then we face a potential issue. And the psychological continuity view is going to say you do survive with one hemisphere of your brain because that hemisphere is psychologically continuous has the same mental stuff your brain did before the other half was removed. So, if one hemisphere of your brain is removed, it looks like you survive, and the psychological continuity view definitely says you survive. But now, let's suppose that instead of one hemisphere being destroyed, one hemisphere of your brain is taken out and put into a new body. And let's say, just for the sake of symmetry, the other hemisphere of your brain is also taken out and put into a new body. Let's say both of these are living human bodies with no brains in them. And so now there are two bodies, each of which has one half of your original brain, one hemisphere of your original brain. So each body only has one hemisphere in it, and each hemisphere is from your original brain. Which of those people is you? Which, if either, of those people is you? Because here's the thing. The psychological continuity view is going to say that anything psychologically continuous with you is identical to you, is the same person as you. That's what it is for you to survive. That's what it is to be you. But in the fission case, this case where each hemisphere of the brain is taken out and put into a new body, both of the resulting people, the resulting one hemisphere people, both of them are psychologically continuous with you. They both have memories from your life. They both have your personality or elements of it. They both understand and things that you understand. They know things you've learned. They recognize your friends and family. So it looks like both of these people on the psychological continuity view are you, are the same person that you are. But they're different than each other. They're not the same person. They're two different people, clearly. So there are two different people who are both identical to you, according to the psychological continuity view. But that can't be right. They can't both be you. You are just one person, and these are two people. So you can't be both of them. And that's logically impossible. One person cannot be two people. 1 and 2 are different numbers. So these two people can't both be you. But it looks like the psychological continuity view is going to have to say that they are both you, because they are both psychologically continuous to you. And there doesn't seem to be any good reason to pick one of them to be the real you as opposed to the other. They both are psychologically continuous with you. They both have one half of your original brain. So what do we do here? So what do we say? Are neither of them you? If neither of them is you, why is neither of them you? Because we said that if one hemisphere of your brain was removed, you would survive. And yet now we're saying that if both hemispheres of your brain are removed and put into new bodies, then you don't survive. So if we take your brain out and put it in a new body, you survive and you go with your brain. Take away one hemisphere, you survive and you go with the one hemisphere of your brain. Put those together. We should say that if you take out both hemispheres and put them into new bodies, you go completely with each single hemisphere. But that can't be right. So it looks like the psychological continuity view gives the wrong answer in the fission case. That's the takeaway here. The fission case leads us into a logical contradiction where we say that you are two people when we know that you're only one. If we take the psychological continuity view, we have to say that you, the one person, become two people, and that's not right. That makes no sense. So we need some other answer. And that's where animalism comes into play. So animalism, defended by someone named Eric Olson, animalism is the view that what you are just is an organism. You are an animal, a biological organism. That is what you are, fundamentally. You are not a mind being run by a brain. You're not an immaterial soul. You are an animal. That's it. You are an animal. So that means that in the brain transplant case, if you and another person go in and have the brains and bodies switch, on the animalism view, you go where your body goes. It works just like a heart transplant. Your brain is just one organ in your body, and you go wherever your body goes. So your body will be fine in this case, and so you will survive. But afterwards, you will have a completely different personality, completely different memories. You'll remember completely different people. You will see your friends and family and not recognize them. You won't remember anything from your life before the surgery because you'll have a new brain. And all the memories and personality and all that stuff, that's all stored in the brain, and you have a new brain now. But just like you as a biological organism survive with a new heart in your original body, you survive with a new brain in your original body. So in the transplant case, if only one of the resulting people can survive, you should want the person with a new brain in your original body, because that's the one that you are. And in the fission case, you go with your body. And so this is how animalism solves the fission problem. Because animalism says that if your brain is removed from your body and the hemispheres are put into new bodies, all right, neat. That's like donating blood and the blood going into multiple people. Who cares? Your body is over here. You stay where your body is. If your body dies in the fission case, then you die in the fission case. No matter what happens with your brain hemispheres, if your body dies, you die. If your body continues to live, maybe they left sort of the lower stem parts needed to keep the body moving, they put it on a ventilator, whatever, then you will continue to live. You will survive. You will still exist. You will not have a brain, you will not have memories, you will have no conscious thought, but you will survive and you will continue to live. So in like brain dead coma type cases, psychological continuity view says you cease to exist. Animalism says you continue to exist and the person is still there. So that's one just real world case difference between these two views. In a coma, where someone's in a coma and brain dead, the psychological continuity view says that the person has ceased to exist. Their body's still there, their body's still alive, but the person is not there anymore. Animalism says the person is still there. They are not thinking, they have no conscious thought, but the person is still there. That's the animalist view. And so one argument for the animalist view that Olson has defended is called the too many thinkers argument. And the argument goes like this. There is a human animal sitting in your chair. And the human animal sitting in your chair is thinking. You are the only thinking thing sitting in your chair. You are the only thinking being sitting in your chair. And therefore, you are the human animal. You are the biological organism. And Olson thinks that this applies to all people, and it shows that we just are biological organisms. Because you presumably are a person. You are a person, and you are sitting and thinking. You are thinking and having thoughts right now. But exactly where you are, there's a biological organism. And that biological organism is also thinking, also having thoughts right now. And so if you are not the biological organism, if you are something different than the biological organism, then there are too many thinkers. There are at least two things sharing these thoughts, having these same token thoughts. There's you, the person, and this biological organism. And you're having the same thoughts. So the biological organism is also thinking, I'm a person, I'm not a biological organism, but the biological organism is wrong. And that's just a weird picture. Olson thinks it should be obvious to all of us that there's only one thinking thing sitting in our chair, sitting in your chair. There's only one thinking thing there. Whatever it is, that's what you are. And there is a biological organism sitting and thinking in your chair. So you must be that biological organism. And that's called the too many thinkers argument. And so this view, animalism, is supposed to show that, or supposed to avoid the Fission Case and similar sorts of issues, and just say that we are a biological organism. Whatever happens to our brain, not important. What matters to survival is that the organism continues to be alive, biologically alive. That is what you are, is this biological organism. And as long as the organism survives, as long as your body's still alive, you are still alive. You persist through time. So all this brain transplant, fission, one hemisphere stuff, we can just ignore on the animalist view. Psychological continuity views say no. It's not clear what to do about the Fission Case, but we all would prefer to be, in the brain transplant case, we all would prefer that the person with our original brain survive rather than the person with our original body survive. So clearly, psychological continuity stuff is what's important. That's what the psychological continuity people say, that clearly this is what we all agree matters in survival, is the mental stuff. That's what we care about. So that should tell us that that's what matters in survival. However, we end up dealing with the Fission Case stuff. But Olson thinks no. Look, logical contradiction in the Fission Case, if you take the psychological continuity view, logical contradictions are bad. Animalism avoids the psychological continuity view, and it avoids this weird too many thinkers problem. So animalism is the view we should go with. Right? But there's also, animalism doesn't give us the answer in all cases, right? So let's look at the transporter case. And there was a YouTube video I sent out. It's called The Trouble with Transporters or something like that. The transporter, sometimes called the teletransporter, comes from Star Trek. I've never seen Star Trek, but philosophers talk about Star Trek because it has a lot of sci-fi nonsense that can be used in thought experiments. And this is one of those pieces of sci-fi nonsense that can be used in thought experiments. So, in Star Trek, there's a transporter. People can teleport because it's in the future, in space, and all that jazz. And so the transporter allows you to teleport from one place to another, instantly traveling across great interplanetary distances. Across the galaxy, you can travel like that. Or so the transporter people claim. So the transporter works, the way it works, apparently, is by mapping the exact arrangement of the particles that you are made of, right down to the electrons and quarks and gluons and so on, all the physicsy particle stuff. The transporter then breaks down your body into the component particles, sends the information about the arrangement of particles to a destination location, wherever you want to be, where particles in the environment are put together in the exact arrangement of your body before you stepped into the transporter. So it maps all of the particles in your body, breaks you down, sends the information about the mapping to the destination location where particles in the environment are put together in the exact arrangement of your body when you stepped into the transporter. So, here's the question. Is the transporter teleporting you to a new location, or is it killing you and building a duplicate in a new location? Is it teleporting you, or is it killing you and cloning you? That's the question. And in Star Trek, it's assumed that it is teleporting you, that you survive. The people aren't like tearfully saying goodbye and putting their affairs in order and signing wills before they step into the teleporter every time. They assume that they survive, that they will be there, that they really are going to exist at the end. And that makes sense, because sure, you're made of different particles after you transport, but you're made of different particles now than you were made of when you were a baby. And you were still that baby. That's still you. You still survive. You're made of completely different stuff now, but you have survived. So, it must be you that arrives at the destination location. It's the exact same arrangement of particles. It looks like it's the same animal, same biological organism by any sort of reasonable definition. But maybe it's not you. So suppose the machine malfunctions, right? Suppose that it fails to break down your pre-teleportation body into the component particles, but still maps the information, still sends the information, the map of the arrangement of particles, to the destination location, where particles in the environment are combined and formed into that arrangement. So a person appears at the destination location with all the memories you have and an exact duplicate, atom for atom, particle for particle duplicate of you. This person shows up in the destination location. But there is still a person standing there at the original location, wondering why they didn't teleport. And so there are now two people, one in the destination location and one in the original location. Both have your original memories, your original personality. Both have the exact arrangement of particles that you had when you stepped into the transporter. But now there are two. And they can't both be you. Just like in the Fission case, you are one person. You can't be two people. So one of these people is you. At most, one of these people is you. So which one is really you? Is it the one that was just put together in the destination location? Or is it the one standing at the teleporter that you just stepped into, wondering why they didn't teleport? It looks like it's probably the one standing in the teleporter wondering why they didn't teleport, right? That person has been standing there for a while. Whereas the person at the destination location, it looks like maybe just came into existence. So they just came into existence. And that's not you, because you existed before you stepped into the transporter. So it looks like the way to accurately describe this malfunction is that the transporter failed to kill you like it usually does, and still created the duplicate as usual. So that means that usually what the transporter does is kill you and make a duplicate in your place. It's just this time it forgot to kill you, or it didn't, or saying a machine forgot something's a little weird. So it just failed to kill you. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to kill you, it just didn't. And that's not great for the people in Star Trek doing the transporting, teleporting all the time. That means they're dying constantly and being replaced by clones, which is probably unsettling. Seems unsettling to me, a little horrifying. But this raises problems for the psychological continuity view too. Because the destination location person is completely psychologically continuous with you. They are completely psychologically continuous with you. By any definition, you want to put it in terms of memories, you want to put it in terms of personality, you want to put it in terms of dispositions to act in certain ways, causal connections, whatever you want to do. They are 100% psychologically continuous with you. And yet it looks like they're not you. And so that is another problem for the psychological continuity view. And it's not clear what animalism has to say about this. I said that animalism probably says that it's the same animal, but why? Maybe this shows that it's not the same animal, because there was an organism that stepped into the transporter and then an organism created at the destination location. And they're different organisms. It looks like the answer we have to give now in this malfunction case. So it's not clear what animalism should say about this. Are they the same organism? Are they not? How do we determine what makes the same organism? Maybe that's an answer for biology, but it looks like it's still some philosophical stickiness there. So what does matter in survival? Maybe it's being an organism and we just have to figure out what it takes for a biological organism to survive. But maybe it's something else. In the transporter case, it looks like you don't survive the transporter, but it's hard to say what you have that the transporter destination person doesn't have. They have all your memories. They are atom for atom, particle for particle duplicate of you. They have all your physical properties in common. They are made of different particles, but you and the baby that you used to be are made of different particles, and you're still you, so that can't be it. So it's not clear what the answer could be here. It's not clear what the answer could possibly be. And that has led, okay, what I'm about to say is slightly false. And that has led some people to think maybe there's no answer here. So it's led some people to accept the Buddhist view, which is much older than the transporter thought experiment. This view has been around for thousands of years, much longer than these thought experiments. But some people in the 20th and 21st centuries, in reaction to these thought experiments, have started to accept the Buddhist view. And the Buddhist view, which I don't want to say all Buddhists believe this, but it is, I think, originates from Buddhist philosophers. The Buddhist view is that there is no self. So you are not a person. Persons aren't real things. There is no self. There is no singular person that persists through time. That is a mistake. That's sort of a fiction. And so there is no answer in these transporter, brain transplant, fission cases, because the self just isn't a real thing. We're asking what it takes for you, yourself, to survive, and there isn't an answer there, because the self isn't a real thing that exists. So strictly speaking, you don't exist. There is no I. There is no entity that is you. When I say I am tired, I am hungry, I used to be a baby, there is no real thing that the word I refers to in that sentence. So Buddhists have said that a person, what we normally call a person, is made up of 5 skandhas, and I'm 100% sure I'm mispronouncing that, but I don't quite know how to pronounce it because I've only really seen it written and heard it pronounced by people who I don't trust pronunciations on. But there are 5 things that a person is made of. There's the material body, sensations, like feelings of that, oh, this is nice, this kind of sucks. That's sensations. Perceptions, so like your experience of colors and shapes and sounds and stuff. Volition or formations, which is like your intentions, your desires, your plans for the future, things like that. And then consciousness, just the raw experience of what it's like to be alive and think and feel things, thought, etc. And so these are the things that exist, and there is no further thing. There is no further entity that has these perceptions and sensations and volitions. There is no self attached to these. It's just this sort of bundle of a body and all these sort of mental things, sensations, volitions, perceptions. And it's just this bundle. And there's no singular entity here. There's just a bundle of stuff, and you can replace stuff, you can pull things out of the bundle, which is what happens if you remove the brain. You leave the body, but you've removed all the perceptions, sensations, consciousness stuff. You can rearrange things from the bundle, but if you're asking, is it the same bundle? That's sort of an error. That's just a mistake. That question doesn't have an answer. There's just this collection of stuff. And so to ask, is this the same entity, is to make an error, to make a mistake. Because there is no singular entity there. There is no self. And that, some people have a very difficult time accepting that and saying, I don't exist, that's a weird thing. Like, say it to yourself and try to believe it, just like for a minute as an experiment. Try to believe that you yourself do not exist. Now, maybe you already believe that, but if you don't already believe it, then it's a hard thing to convince yourself of. But it avoids all of this philosophically difficult stuff. You get to ignore the transporter case because, all right, so now there are two bundles that are similar in all these ways, whereas before there was only one bundle that was similar. Fine. There's no deeper question there. In the brain transplant case, you don't really need to care which of those people you are and which one survives, because there's no real you there to survive. There were two people before the brain transplant case. Now there are also two people with the bundles rearranged a bit. All right. And that's all there is to it. So it's, in some ways, it's simpler. It avoids all these issues. And if you're the kind of person who's inclined to think that philosophy is nonsense, or that science and empirical evidence is the only thing that really justifies belief, then what the transporter case should show is that your belief about what you are and whether or not you survive can't be answered empirically. There is no empirical answer there, because in the transporter case, the person at the destination location has all the empirical properties, all the empirically identifiable properties that you have. The person at the destination location of the transporter case has those properties. So the difference between the person at the destination location and you can't be discovered empirically. Whether or not you survive the transporter case can't be discovered empirically. And so if you think that empirical evidence is the only thing that justifies belief, then you should probably think that the Buddhist view is a good view. It makes sense because it takes away this sort of question about what's really you. It says there's no answer there. And if you think empirical evidence should be the only way we find answers, then you get to ignore this question that doesn't have an empirical answer. So that should be a selling point. But I'm not trying to convince you of any particular view. I'm just trying to give an overview of the options. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So the three views you can have, or three of the views you can have in personal identity philosophical debates: psychological continuity view, the Buddhist view that there is no self, there is really no such thing as a person, and the animalism view that what you are is a biological organism. And then the thought experiments are the Fission Case, brain transplant case, and the transporter case that sort of put pressure on these different views and raise issues about what it takes for you to survive. All right. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm happy to talk about this stuff. If you're watching this today, the day I posted it, then Unit 2 assignment and the Unit 1 corrections are due by midnight. So if you haven't turned it in, do so now. But I will post a new lecture video next week on the mind-body problem. Until then, stay safe out there.